got our quilt sandwiched, and that means we laid it out on the floor, which was the easiest for me because I have a big old wood floor, and I taped down the backing, the right side to the ground, and put some painter's tape on the corners, and then I laid out my batting and put it on there, and then I sprayed it with 505 spray to adhere it to the backing. And then I did the same thing with the top. You want the top right side up and laying down on top of the batting, and then you want to spray it down and get it adhered good also. And then we took it up. Now we're ready to quilt it. There are several ways to do some quilting. You can send it out to a long arm quilter. This runs $100+, so that might not be what you can afford, so you might want to do it a different way if you want to do it yourself. But that is definitely the easiest way that there is. You can also stitch in the ditch. Just run it in your regular sewing machine. You just stitch right on the seam line, and that's called the ditch. And you can go around your blocks. Depending on your loft of batting will determine how close you want your stitching. So you might have to go around more than just the big block, depending on what size they are. This kind of hides your quilting on the front to do it in the ditch. Sometimes it's hard to get over on one side and it jumps around, but it's definitely an easy way to do it. You can also stitch diagonally across the quilt. I've done this before on a log cabin I made, and I just laid my piece of painter's tape, a real wide one, and laid it across the quilt, and then I stitched right on the edge of the painter's tape. After that, you get your line made. You just move the painter's tape over and put that side next to the stitching line that you just stitched, and just keep stitching that way. If you're going to do it on your sewing machine, you've got to be careful, because a lot of sewing machines don't have a lot of throat space to where you can roll your quilt up and put it up in there. So you kind of have to turn it and do down the other side, but it's definitely doable. You might have to fight it a little bit. You can do a free motion quilting on your sewing machine, and you can, a lot of people do stippling this way. You just put it in there, you drop the feed dogs, and you move around your quilt on the top. It's easier if you have gloves on, but you can definitely do that. You can also tie it off. I've done this mainly on t-shirt quilts that I've made, and you can use a curved darning needle, and you use 6 strands of embroidery floss, and you put them through your needle, and then you just take a little bite out of the fabric and pull it up until there's still a tail left on it, and then you cut it off, and then you tie a square knot in that, and then you can also trim down your threads to the bottom, and that's fun. The last method is you can use the edge to edge. Amelie Scott does this and sells DVDs and books and even downloads now. And I have her book, and that's the method I'm going to use today. Also, Designs by Juju has end-to-end designs, and I've purchased some of theirs too. And there's just so many out there now, and they're so pretty. You can tailor it to your quilt, whatever it signifies to you, the design that you want to use. But you do have to use your embroidery machine for this, and that's what we're here for today, is to teach you on the embroidery machine. So let's dive in. First things first. Okay, so we are going to use the Amelie Scott spring design that I purchased from Amelie Scott. And so I've taken a piece of stabilizer. I'm using the OESD embroidery stabilizer, and I'm using the heavyweight tearaway. And what I've already done is I loaded the design into my embroidery machine, and I hooped me a piece of stabilizer, and I stitched out the design. You can download designs or get them off of the CD that they send to you if you order that, and you can pick different sizes. The hoop I'm using today is a 7 by 12. Okay, so I have stitched it out, and before you unhoop it, you want to take your grid, your template, and there's some little notches in here that you want to put your design in. And you want to make sure they're in on the sides and on the top and on the bottom. And there are little dots in here in the middle of the grid, okay? So what we're going to do is mark those. And we're just going to draw a little circle in each one. Because we're going to use this template over and over again to know where to put it on our quilt. Okay, and then once you have your little holes marked, you're going to unhoop it. And pop out your design. It was kind of noisy, sorry about that. And then you're going to take your ruler and you want to mark your grid lines. So I'm just going to go down the center of each of those. I'm going to make a vertical line and the horizontal lines. Now we are going to take our design. We're going to put this mat underneath here. This cutting mat. Need a new one in the worst way. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut the design out as close to the stitching as we can. And we're going to line up our lines on our ruler, the ones we just marked, across and horizontal. Horizontal and vertical. And we're going to cut as close to the stitching as we can. You can see right there is your marks. And these are going to be your start point and your end points. So we're just going to take our rotary cutter. Line up our lines. Vertical was a little bit off, so I wanted to move it just a little. We're going to trim it off. Now you've got your design. And there, with Amelie Scott's designs, there is an A and a B. And so you will do one whole column in A all the way down. And then the next one you'll do a B and it'll be all the way down. And these start points and end points will meet on each one of those so that it looks like a continuous design like the long arm quilters use. Okay. Next, we'll show you how to hoop your quilt. Okay, this design I did, the quilt I made is through the window again, and the finished size of it is 45 by 59. I took those measurements, and then I took my pattern. I'm doing the medium size of this spring, and the width of the design, just the sewed off part, is 6.1 by 11.7. So I did measure this to make sure, and that is the size. So after you get your piece cut out, that should be the size you have. What you need to do is determine how many you need across and how many you need down, and that will tell you where you want to sew your designs, how many designs you'll need. So that's going to tell you where to start. We want to start in the middle, but it's not necessarily going to be the exact center of the quilt. You may start one over if it's an even number, and if it's an odd number, you're probably going to start this right in the center of the quilt. My quilt has blocks on it, so it's going to be easy to line up when I'm taping this down. Use a regular embroidery thread. I'm going to be using Isacord. I really like this thread. It's a very high quality, and so I'm going to use embroidery thread. I'm also going to use some pre-wound bobbins. So if you use the pre-wound bobbins, they go so much further than winding your own bobbins. If you're gonna wind your own bobbins, you need to wind up a bunch of them so that you don't have to stop and do that in the middle of quilting your quilt. So if I use the pre-wound bobbins, you need to tighten the top tension to a 4.6. Okay. I'm also going to use the batting that I used is Warm and Natural. You want to use a thin batting. You don't want to use a high loft batting in your quilts to use this technique. I wished I had a magnetic frame, but I don't, so I'm going to show you how I do it on my machine. You do need a size 90 needle with this, and you want to set up your embroidery machine to get started. Okay, I have a Brother Anovus VM5100 that we're going to be sewing on today, and I wanted to put my pre-wound bobbins in. There is a separate bobbin case that you can use the pre-wound bobbins with that fits down in there. It has a little attachment in there that keeps them from jumping up and down. And I got these pre-wound bobbins at my sewing supply store, and they really go a long way. So I'm using muslin on the back of my quilt, so I'm using this color right here. I usually try to do the backing the same as the pre-wound bobbins. So I took my bobbin case out and was about to put the other one in, and look at this. Had some lint down in there, so I just got me a Q-tip and just kind of cleaned it out. I'll try to do a separate video on how to keep your machine cleaned out. So we wanted to get all that out before we put this new case in. Okay. Look at that. Yuck. Okay, and this bobbin case just drops right down in there. There's a little slot to make it fit. And you have to get your thread going the right way. It has on here exactly which way it needs to come off of the bobbin. And it's this way. So I'm going to put my cover back on. Put that in there. And it just winds around, cuts off. And I just put a new needle in, and it was a 90 needle. You have to use a 90 needle for your needle threader to work. Okay, so we are ready to start our quilting. And I've got my quilt laid out here on the table. And I have found my center point is right in the middle here. So I'm going to take my pattern and I have cut it down to where only the sewing's going to be. I've measured out on the quilt how many I need across, and it's going to go just a little bit off the sides. Now you'll notice the backing here, I put extra on the top, the bottom, and on the sides. That way you have enough to hoop your material. So I'm going to place it right here where I want to start my sewing, about 1/4 of an inch down. And I'm going to put it right in the middle here. Luckily I have blocks and sashing so that I can follow and see if it's straight on here. So I've got my top straight. I'm about in the middle of this sashing strip here. And I don't have a magnetic hoop. I'm just going to do this with my regular hoop. So I've put pieces of tape on here. Now I'm going to take my top hoop and I'm going to put my grid on here. And it's got the little notches to put your grid in. So you want to make sure those are all in there right. And then all I have to do is line up the little circles that I drew and line it all up in there. Make sure my lines are all even. And I've got the little circles drawn and lined up. So that's where I want my hoop to go. Now you want to take your hoop and you want to loosen it as much as you can without that little screw falling out. Okay. Then you're going to slide this underneath. Luckily this 7x12 hoop has a screw at the top and at the bottom. So hopefully I can kind of get it in place and slide it on there. You can kind of feel the top and the bottom if you need to go up or down. You want to try to make sure your little circles are still lined up. I'm going to push that in. Needs to go down a little ways. So it might take a minute. Now you can kind of push it in there, and then before you tighten your screw, you might want to pull your material one way or the other, whichever way you need to pull it, to make those dots line up on there. Okay, so I think that's where I want it. I'm going to tighten this top one. Make sure it's still in there good. Sometimes I got to get my whole weight on here. I'm going to reach in here. Kind of going to hold it down inside that hoop and tighten it up. It's trying to jump out. Just make sure you don't have it too tight, or it'll try to jump out of there. Okay, and all my little circles are lined up. Make sure my grid's in there. And then I'm just going to pull it a little ways. Just want that very first one to be pretty precise. Okay, that's as much as I can tighten it. Next, you're going to take out your grid. And you're just going to take off your little piece. And it's ready to take over to your machine. Sweet! Okay, I have my brother all set up. I've got the color embroidery thread on the top. I have a number 90 needle, and I have pre-wound bobbins inside the case. Okay. Now I have downloaded my designs onto a USB stick. So what I'm going to do is I've turned my machine on and I've got my USB stick in over here. And I'm just going to press this button right here so it can read it. Okay, and I happen to know when I was looking for it, it's down here on page 13, and I want to make sure I have design A loaded up in there. There it is. So I'm going to set it. You can see it. Okay, and what I've got, I don't have a fancy schmancy quilt holder. So what I do is I set up my big long table, and that carries the weight of the quilt when it's on the back. And then I have this little card table on the side that I put up to hold it on the side because you don't want the weight pulling down on the sides. All right, let's get it hooped up. Alright, I'm going to click embroidery to set my design, and it's ready to sew. I'm going to do +1 here so that it'll go to the beginning point, and it moved over. And now I'm going to take my thread, and you want to always pull up your bobbin thread to the top. I'm going to hold my thread, and I'm going to push needle down and then needle back up, and it should pull that bobbin thread up. I left it a little short because I had it in my cutter. Okay, and then you want to pull that out some. You want to hold both of your threads out here. Put your presser foot down. Woo! Let's go. I'm going to press stop. Now you can just cut these because they have tie-off threads at the beginning and at the end. I used to tape these and tie knots in them, but anymore I found they do not come out. So I just trim those off and get it going. Okay, now we're ready to take it off, and we're going to take it over to the table and we're going to re-hoop it for our second one. We're ready to do our second hooping, and I failed to mention that this is design number A, and so we're going to place them all going down like this. And then the next row we'll turn it around and it'll be B. Instead of making 2 templates, I just turn it over because it's the same pattern. Okay, we're going to go about a ½ inch down from our last hooping. And we're going to go right in the center of here where we were just a minute ago. So you can see what's about a ½ inch down. I'm maybe going to go a little bit less than the half, because from my measurements it was going to be exactly a fit without the in-between spaces. So I'm going to go about right there. Going to put my grid on. Again, you're going to line up your vertical line and your horizontal lines where your little circles are drawn in the middle of each of those. We're going to go underneath with our hoop. And we know we have this taped on here, so we know that it's not moving around. Snap it in. Make sure this is in there even. It looks like it needs to come up a little, so you can unhoop it. Or you can just pull the material up just a little bit. Just kind of maneuver your hoop just a little. And you're going to tighten up your screw so it doesn't fall out. We loosened it pretty good before we got it in there. And then you just take it back in, put it in. You can see how they're all lined up. And go for your second one. We'll do this row all the way down. Okay, you want to put your tension on 4.6, and you want to take off this end color trim highlighted. So you want to unhighlight that. That way your bobbin thread will stay longer so that it pulls up easier the next time. Also, we're going to close that, and once your pattern comes up, instead of doing the add one stitch every time to get to the beginning, you can click this button right here.
Since we couldn't use
try to get that focused for you guys. And then just click this right here. And that will take you right to that starting point where it's going to start sewing. That way you can match it up to your previous end point. Okay. Next we're going to make, we already got our first row done, our column. We did the column all the way down. Now we're going to go do the second column. So you just want to, we started in the center, you want to go next to it. And we have turned the pattern over because we're going to do embroidery patterns B. So I've got this up at the top, and then I have this thread meeting right where it's supposed to go. Okay, we're going to put our hoop over. We're going to put our grid in here. We're going to line it up with the lines and the little circles. We're going to slide our hoop underneath here. Just like we did before. My line's got a little bit off, so I'm just going to pull that material down before I tighten the screw. Actually, I'm going to pull it up. Okay, we're going to tighten our screw on our hoop. Make sure it's in there nice and tight. Make sure it doesn't pop out. We're going to take it out. We're going to go over to our machine. We're over at the machine now. And I hit my +1 button to make it go to where the starting one is. And you can see where the end point on the last one was and then the start point. So you want to kind of put your needle down and make sure that it's right on there. You can move your design around. There's not a whole lot of room. This one is 11.7 and my hoop is a 12. So I did move it just a hair over and then down, and then you can get it right on there. And then you want to put your needle down and your needle up so that you can bring up your bobbin thread.
Well, it wouldn't take this back.
You're going to lower your presser foot, hold your threads, and get it started. That way you know it's going to be right where you need it. I use little cuticle scissors to cut my threads. That rounded edge does really good. Looks great. We're going to keep going. Be sure and pick your second design, design B, on your embroidery, on your USB card. I'm on my 4th row, so I have the template going with the B side up, and I barely had enough material in there to get that edge in. That's why you want to allow extra material with your backing. But I got it lined up, and it's going to go off of the edge a little bit on where the quilting ends. So you can either stop the machine when it gets to sewing that, or you can tape down the edge of it or spray down the edge of it to make sure that the needle doesn't get caught on the edge of your quilt. Okay, I wanted to quickly show you how to move your design around. I hit the +1 button after I had my design pulled up, and that way it put me right at the start point of where my quilting is going to start. And it was just a little bit off on my machine of where it needed to be. And so I need to move it around just a little bit. So I go over here and I'm going to close this, and I'm going to hit return, and then you can move the design around, whether it needs to go over a couple or down a couple right here. And that way you can get your needle start position where you want it. Then you'll just hit the embroidery button again, and it's back in the center. So you're going to have to go to your +1, and you saw the little arrow jump here, and that's where it's going to start. Okay, so I'm right over on the edge of my quilt here, and I just barely had enough backing to put in there, but I did get it hooped. So you have two choices. The first one is you can run a piece of tape down just about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge of your quilt, and then you can just let the whole design stitch all the way over it. And that's the first method we're going to try. The second one is you can stop the skip stitches right at the edge from going over and sewing over here. So we'll do this first one first and see what happens. I've had the machine off, so I had to reset the tension to a 4.6, and I got it right where I want it. And I'm going to pull up that bobbin thread. Put your presser foot down. Gonna stop it. Trim those threads off. And get it going again. Because you will trim off your quilt with trim off the batting and the backing right on the edge of your quilt. I did have spray adhesive on there, but it still can get, that presser foot can get caught up under the edge of the quilting. So this time we're just going to let it sew all the way. This design's only 2 minutes long. And I turned off for it to cut the thread so that it would leave my bobbin thread long so that I could trim it. So after each hooping, you need to cut your top thread and your bobbin thread. Okay, then we'll just be able to peel off that extra tape on the sides, and then we'll be able to trim 1/4 of an inch along there. Okay, let's try our second method. I'll rehoop. Okay, on that last design, I did move the pattern around. So I want to make sure I get it centered again in case this hooping is spot on. So I'm just going to hit that middle button and it'll go back to the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit this button and hit +1. And it'll take me right here to the beginning of where it's going to start sewing. So we will look over here and see. I'm going to put my needle in the down position, and it looks like it needs to go down just a couple. So I've got to close this out and hit return. Oh. And I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to go down about 2 or 3. Now my pattern won't go down any further, so I'll have to rehoop it if that doesn't hit the spot. Then you have to hit embroidery again. Then we're going to hit our +1. And it got us to the start. Let's check it again. I'll put the needle down and back up. And that one is spot on. Now put my presser foot down. We're going to try to sew this off. Get it started. And we're going to hit go. And this time we are going to watch our pattern over here on the side. And once it gets close to the edge of the quilt, we're going to hit stop. So I'm going to get my finger ready on this button. And that little green line goes around your pattern. so that you can see where it's sewing. Now it's about to go right off the edge, and you can see over here on the screen, and you can see where this little arrow is, so you know where all this side over here is going to sew off of the edge. And you just want to make sure mainly that it doesn't get caught on the edges of that material. And it's almost off the edge, so I'm watching my little arrow, and it went off the edge a bit, but I could tell it didn't get that fabric. It's going to make a little loop and then go off. Okay, it went off the edge, so I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to pull my needle up, and then I'm just going to hit my either +1 or +10 button till it gets back over on the quilt top while it's not sewing, because this material can get run up under that presser foot, and oh, it makes a mess. So I'm just going to hit +1 till I get back over here on the other side of that heart, and I go about 1/4 of an inch in. Then you're just going to hit go again, the green light. Okay, it's going to go off the edge again. So I'm going to pull my needle up, and I'm going to go 10 at a time because this is right over here on the edge. You can go 100 or 500 if you want to, but we don't want to go that many. If you go too far, you can hit the minus button and come kind of closer to the edge to start sewing. We're just going to start right there and see where we can go around on this flower. Went off again. Kind of pulled that material up. So maybe taping that down is going to work better for us. Because we're off again. This is how I used to do it all the time till I saw somebody taping it down. Okay, we made it to the end. So my vote is to tape it down. That worked so much faster, and you didn't have to start and stop, and then the threads are all loose over here. So definitely that's my vote. That's how I'm going to do the rest of this side edge and probably the other edge too. Okay, we have got the first 4 rows done, and I'm going to need to put 4 more on. It's looking fabulous. Guess you'd call me a fake or a faux long armor. So I've got those 4 rows on. Next I'm going to start, I'm going to turn the quilt upside down, and then we're going to start in the center, and we're going to go out and do this side. That way you don't have so much up under the throat of your machine. So I've got my design A. I started with design A, but when you turn it now, it's upside down and it looks like a B. So you do design A on this side, and now on this one the hearts and butterflies and flowers are going up instead of down. So I've got my next piece on there, Gonna line it up and hoop it. They do have a print and stick paper that you can purchase that works really well. Then you don't have to put your little masking tape down. You just print it off and put it in there, and then you can sew. You just take the piece of sticky paper off just before your embroidery, just like you do this one. I didn't get any of that because on my pattern that I did, I am doing the medium size, and so the width is 6.1 by 11.7. So the paper is 11.5, so it wouldn't have printed on the entire piece of paper. So what I did is just did it on this and didn't use the print and stick paper. But you could use that if you used the smaller design, the 5.1 by the 9.9. And I just like to get as much in there as I can. The large design is 7.2 inches by 13.8 inches. But I don't have a hoop that big, so that's why I chose that one. There we go. Now you're going to take the edge of your quilt and you're going to trim off all the batting and the backing after you get it all quilted. Then we'll be ready for our binding. So just take it and take you a ruler. This one 6 by 24 inch works really well. That edge right on the edge of your quilt. You may want to save these edges for something else. Now I'm not sure how this painter's tape on here is going to come off because it's stitched down. And to see the edge, we're going to need to peel that off before we sew it down. But I think if I take some back, I can see the edge of where my quilt's supposed to be. Oh, it tears really easy, so that'll be good. So we're going to line it up down here, line it up at the end of my ruler. Then you'll just have to take those little pieces out. And if the thread comes out a little bit, that's okay because that's where we'll sew our binding down. Okay, we'll get the rest of this trimmed up. It only took one pre-wound bobbin to do this whole quilt. I'm getting excited. Almost to the end. Isn't that beautiful? Love it. Ta-da! I'll be back with another video for some binding. Thanks for joining.